Hello, it's Friday the 6th of October 2017 and I thought I would produce another one of these video diary updates to sketch out some of the work we've been progressing with on our British Muslim values research project. And it's been a really exciting time on the project recently. We now have 9 completed films from our filmmakers, and we've got another film almost there that's being made in Norwich at the moment, just awaiting end credits and those kind of things, and some filming underway in Luton as well. So we've made some really fantastic progress. I say our filmmakers, our participant researchers have made some really fantastic progress on this project recently and produced some really excellent, some really powerful and some particularly thought-provoking footage, all of which deals with this question in different ways about what do we mean by British values, how does it relate to Islam, Muslim values, all those kinds of things. And if you're watching this before the 31st of October 2017, we'll be screening some of these films and following that with a question and answer discussion at the forum in Norwich, so 31st of October 2017, and we'll put full details of that event up on our website as well. Now, I haven't watched these films as thoroughly as I would like to have yet, or as thoroughly as I will yet, and I haven't coded them or done anything like that with them. But having watched a number of these through now, I thought it might be useful or perhaps interesting to share some of my very initial, very provisional findings about the content within these films. And I guess there were a couple of things that struck me initially as interesting and worth recording. And the first thing is that one of the themes that comes through a number of these films quite strongly is that there's a lack of clarity about what the term British values means. To kind of paraphrase one of the participants in one of these films, said something like, I don't know, it doesn't mean anything to me. And that sense that the meaning of British values is unclear to people, to Muslim individuals and communities living within Eastern England is important, I think, and it certainly speaks to my own understanding about British values and a lot of problems that I think lots of other people have with this term. This idea that British values is very, very elusive and slippery and difficult to pin down. And the second thing that comes through in a number of these films that is interesting is that there's a real sense of scepticism about the usage of this term by political elites, but by the media and others. That it is, as one of the interviewees in one of the films put it so powerfully, that the term British values is like a warning. It's like a warning to certain communities who, as someone else put it, have to prove themselves that they are British, and that this idea that the term British values is thrown out there as a warning, as an alarm call, if you like, to particular individuals and particular communities especially. And that happens after violent, traumatic and tragic events. And lots of people gave the example of extremist violences of various sorts and those kind of things. So there's a real sense that this term British values is used as a political weapon, as a political tool in a way to perhaps discipline or subjugate or strike fear into particular communities for one reason or another, and a real striking sense that it is Muslim communities in particular that are targeted in that way by the British establishment, and there's lots and lots I think to unpack within that. And yet, so we've got these two kind of problems, if you like, with the term British values. On the one hand, we don't know quite what it means. On the other hand, it might be manipulated and abused for political ends. And yet, despite those two problems, another thing that comes through in several of these films that I've now watched is that there's a real sense that there's complementarity between what we might think of as British values and values associated with Islam. That although people have these concerns about the term, there was a real sense of people wanting to demonstrate and wanting to prove, if you like, that their own ways of life, their own values do accord in some way or another with British values. So there's a real effort to claim an attachment between these two phenomena, between British values and Muslim values, that if British values is about treating people with dignity and respect, looking after others and so forth, then we as Muslims, if you like, in these films, are already doing that. We're abiding by these values. And at first glance, there's obviously a potential disconnect there. There's a disconnect between not knowing what British values are, what British values means, on the one hand, and claiming to abide by or value them or practice them on the other. That doesn't seem to quite marry as well as we might like. And I think there are at least two possible reasons for that, or two possible answers to that, if you like. On the one hand, it might be the case that British values are so vague, are so articulated in such a vague way, so broadly, that almost whatever one believes, whatever one thinks, whatever one does, could be put under the heading of British values, because this heading is so vague and so broad and so loose, if you like. So ideas of freedom or respect or whatever can encompass almost any type of practice or behaviour, if interpreted in the right kind of way. That we might then think of British values as empty signifiers, if you like, that can be filled in various ways by people legitimately. A second possible answer, and these aren't necessarily oppositional to one another, they might go hand in hand, is that the idea that maybe British values has an emotional appeal or a political appeal that goes beyond any substantive content that the term has. So we might, for example, think that the term British values is kind of meaningless, it's kind of vague, but be prepared to bracket that sense of meaninglessness, that vagueness, because of a desire, a more powerful desire perhaps, to identify with British values, or to be seen by others to identify with British values. And we can think of all sorts of political and social climates in which that might make sense to do for certain individuals or certain communities, that it might be prudent to be seen to be abiding by British values, even if one has kind of deep-rooted questions about what exactly this term means. Now, as I say, those are only some very, very provisional and initial thoughts about the footage that I've been watching, and hopefully there's something interesting there. What I'll try to do is come back to that second point about the perceived manipulation of this term by politicians and others in a later post, and that, I think, really interests me because, of course, it shifts our focus from a question about what do British values mean, which is what I've been discussing here, to a slightly different question about what work do ideas of British values do politically, or in terms of forming identities or constructing antagonisms between communities and those kind of things. But as I say, I thought I would share my excitement and share my very initial thoughts with you about these films that our participant researchers, our filmmakers, have been working so fantastically hard on over the last few months. So that's it. Thanks a lot. Bye bye.